So when we look at personalized or differentiated options in learning management systems, this is where the systems can really make this work incredibly easy. In the past, while a lot of people did, feel that offering a personalized learning experience for students or, even differentiating based on, older theories around, learning styles and things like that, while they, felt that that could be potentially useful for students, the technology really wasn't there to try to make it manageable for teachers. So it really wasn't very feasible. It wasn't really an option. And so I bring that up because in this section, we're actually going to break this up into two parts. The first is just on how do you actually personalize and differentiate, either based on, as you can see from the chart that I put in from University of William and Mary, if you're actually looking at more traditional differentiation options, or if you just have an IEP that you have to deal with, and there are some certain accommodations that you have to set up in your class. Either way, the system makes these things much easier than they have been in the past. So that's really helpful. So when you think about differentiation, and just to kind of back up, this is sort of in the same vein as rubrics. There's, often some debate in academic circles and even in K-12 around what, how useful differentiated learning is. Should we actually be personalizing things for students? And, honestly, you'll find research on both ends of the spectrum here that support that. So as you'll find in much of education, there's hedging on almost every single issue. And differentiation is really no different from all of that. What I would tell you about that is that as you try some of these different things, just keep collecting your data, because you're going to be able to tell for yourself if this is working or not, for you and your students. And that's the real value of systems like this. So when you're looking at, if you are looking at what is traditionally known as differentiation, teachers can differentiate their content or the process by which they teach or the product that they ask students to create. And it can be done according to student readiness, their interest, or their learning profile. And this is, if you want to do any of these things, these are all, certainly possibilities within Canvas. Just know that there are some efforts that, and we'll get into this more in Mastery Learning, they're making strides in these directions, but the tools still aren't quite there. They're not exactly where they need to be, but they made an important first step. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So as far as this particular section, I'm just going to talk about different ways that you can either meet an individual student's required accommodations, or that you can just offer these things to students on a, sort of different sections related to quizzes and groups and things like that. So the first thing I'm going to look at is actually groups. And if I go into, let's see, in order to find groups or create groups, you just need to go into people. And you will see groups kind of set up here. And this can be, of course, according to anything. It could be, individual research groups where one group is researching one component of your unit and someone else is doing another. It can be, mixed ability grouping. It can be, there's the possibilities are endless, basically. But anytime that you want students to work together, you can put them together in a group in Canvas, and they can collectively submit an assignment. They can have individual collaboration spaces that you can monitor, and they can submit things that you can grade, and the grade disperses to all of them. Now, you can also break that up, when you actually grade student work, you can give individual student grades if you choose to do so. But if you just have like a general group grade, it can kick out, and then everybody gets the same grade, the same feedback, everybody understands how the group responded. So depending on what it is you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish in your class, the group function is pretty well set up, and it's very easy. You just, click on group set. You would call this, or your project name, or, if it's full semester groups, you would just call it that. They can self-sign up. So if it's just, you pick a topic and go in and find the topic that you want to research with other people, you can do that. You can split, it has you to split them up into groups. You can create the groups manual, or it will just kick them all at random into groups. So, it's pretty versatile as far as tools go. Some tools are limiting in Canvas, but the groups function works pretty well. The only thing I would say about this is that the collaboration features, I think at Google, are definitely better. They're just a little bit easier. They're more streamlined. Students and teachers are already accustomed to using them. I haven't seen too many tools that are as good with online collaboration on a document or a presentation or even a spreadsheet as Google is. It's just very, very seamless. Now, the problem is, and I think I've mentioned this before, but um, Canvas is great as a landing spot. It's a great place to start, and then you can kind of scatter and go anywhere that you like. But if you do have them just go ahead and collaborate on Google, you as their instructor will be able to see, what they're doing and how they're collaborating. But it is an external source of data. This may not be really critical to you right now because you're just kind of getting going on this, but trust me, a year in, you're going to become a complete data junkie because what the system can tell you about what's working for you and your students. I see very few tools outside of maybe Portfolio that give you better data on things like that. So just know that if you do have them use an external tool and you have access to that dashboard, you may fully be able to see everything, in Seesaw, which is great. But that's an extra data collection point. So as you merge that with what you're seeing in Canvas, it's just going to take a little bit of manipulation between these two different platforms so that you get a really robust idea of what's going on. So I don't really advocate, for any one choice or the other. Just know that the more external tools you use, the more likely it is that you're going to have to pull data from that to figure out what's working and what's not. That may be perfectly fine right now, and it may be perfectly fine forever. Personally, I didn't really access a ton of the information out of the student group, so I didn't care if they were doing a group message on a text or using a group on Facebook. It didn't make any difference to me how they were collaborating. I didn't need to monitor it, and I wasn't using that particular data. But your situation might be different, so just kind of a little thing to keep in mind, when you're looking at all this. Okay, what I'm going to do to show you the other personalized features, I'm just going to go into the demo unit and actually look on the housing policy quiz, because this one kind of has sort of everything that you're looking for. So one of the ways that you can differentiate is by figuring out certainly student ability, where they're at, but also what their interests are. That was another potential opportunity. And so this can manifest in a class, perhaps in a, pre-unit quiz, a, prior knowledge assessment of some kind. It can be a survey, just asking them what are the different things that you find most interesting. The quiz section in Canvas is where you're going to go for that. Now, it's limited though. This is the probably one of the only things that, there are a few things for me that are a little bit frustrating about Canvas, but one of them is that the question types are somewhat limited when you compare it to other learning management systems. So when I look into the questions, for example, and I'm just going to edit this question, then you can see that there are different question choices. And this seems like a lot, it really does. And most of these you're not going to use, you're probably going to stick with your favorites, and that's pretty basic. But there are, other opportunities too. Blackboard, for example, which is not used very much anymore. I think it was just too expensive. But it had 17 question types, and right around things like hotspot, like just point to this part of the map to tell me where the capital of Peru is, like that sort of thing. That some of these were really kind of robust question types that almost made it into more of a game. This has really just kind of the basics. It's got true, false, fill in the blank, that sort of thing. And these may be mostly what you use, but we'll talk a little bit later about tools that you can actually integrate into Canvas. It takes a little bit of work, but sometimes depending on your subject area, it might be really valuable. So kind of my point, sorry to circle back a little bit, is that if you are polling students, it doesn't, you'll notice, have a Likert option or a semantic differential option. So those are two question types within a survey that really give you a much better sense of how students are doing. You can do this multiple choice. You can type in, strongly agree, strongly disagree, things like that if you choose. It's just not, it doesn't really flow quite as well as some other options, but it still functions. Again, you can still use tools like Socrative, Poll Everywhere, Google Forms. You can easily embed those things into Canvas. But again, even when you use the embed tool or the embed code in it, you may or may not be able to extract the data from it quite as easily. So just kind of a thing long term, to be thinking about. So anyway, that's how you can gauge student interest. You can certainly do a review of the Grade Center. Hopefully you guys have gotten a pretty robust training on the Grade Center at this point. But within grades, you can, break it down by category. You can look for specific tags on questions. You can, the way that you can drill down in that data is really, really helpful. And that can give you an idea of certainly students' abilities in certain areas, particularly if you're weighting your grades. Then you can tell, okay, is this just a kid who's not turning in their homework, or do they actually like not know the material? That'll give you, a much better sense of what you're dealing with. The last thing I would point out are accommodations, and I'll just use quizzes as an example here, but discussions and assignments also have these functions. So anything that you can take a grade for in Canvas, you can do this. So if you scroll down, when you're in the sort of detail section of this quiz, you scroll down past your directions and, all of your other grade items, multiple attempts, things like that. This is where, let me see, I'm sorry, I need to go down further. All right, so this is where I can see an assign option. And the default, you've probably noticed, is everyone. Okay, so it's defaulted to be assigned to everybody. If you have certain people with accommodations, okay, and you can see this is an example I had from before. So if you click add, and then you find an individual person, I'll just grab somebody here, and I am going to let them have a different due date. So originally it was the 24th, but let's say they're allowed an extra week, so I'm going to say September 1st is going to be their deadline for it. So it would be great if you could just do this for students as a blanket policy across the board in Canvas. But unless I'm missing something, and again, check with your team, check with your any special ed liaisons that you have, any other academic team members that help you with IEPs. Be sure your tech team certainly. There may be a way in the dashboard to do this, to make a blanket policy. I don't know if there is or not. If there is, definitely check on it. What I always tell people is if you're spending more than 5 minutes doing something and it's repetitive, there's probably an easier, faster way. So it doesn't really hurt you to ask. So definitely ask. But that is kind of what you are allowed to do, to make some changes and some exceptions. Now, your other options, and I have a link to a really great article. It's a few years old, but it still holds. Everything in that article still holds around how you can accommodate these things. But the other thing that a lot of people do is they will accept exempt assignments. So let's say, Maryland is exempt from that. If you just click EX, then it's excused. The nice thing about that, you could leave it blank, but sometimes you have to rely on your memory then about, well, why is it blank? Did they not do it? Whatever. If they're excused from it, you can just, make that very, very clear. So that's kind of the nice part. There are some other options. Let me see if I can go back to the quiz that I had. There is a moderation option as well. So if I go back to, I'm sorry, I should have stayed in there. But if I go into the quiz off to the right, you should see a moderate this quiz option. And if you click on that, then if there are, specific things that students need, particularly extra attempts, if they're allowed multiple, not time extensions, but they're allowed to, take it multiple times and the system is not going to mark it late, or it's not going to not allow them in. Like if you only allow one submission, then they call you and they ask why they can't see it again. So you can certainly do that for individual students. These are just a few examples. There are, the diversity of students are endless. Their needs are endless. So, I just wanted to touch base on a few things that are very common. But if there are very specific things and you're not really sure about how to do that, check with your tech team or definitely just reach out to me. I'm sure I can kind of help you figure it out if you can't, quite find it, even though our systems are a little bit different. But that's kind of just sort of the basic way that you can offer some differentiation, personalization, and meet those IEPs in a way that's, relatively simple and that tracks everything so that anytime there's a question or a concern, it's real easy to pull up the answer.